what would you classify as the challenges associated with the costs involved in producing or capturing CO2 from feedstock sources such as ethanol or distillery plants? Should we stay with you on that one for a moment, Chris?
Sure. I think economy of scale is probably the first one, and that's the same challenge that we have with biogas plants. You're talking about plants usually, if you're looking at the distillery, ethanol can be different. If it's bioethanol, it could be bigger. If it's just a potable ethanol plant, sometimes they're smaller. If it's if you're producing whiskey, then it's going to be usually going to be even smaller. But you're talking about something that's maybe one fifth, a quarter scale of what the typical CO2 plant is, and that's what you're competing against. If you're going to recover your CO2 and take it into the industry, you're competing against plants that have better capital efficiency in their investments. So that's the primary one. The secondary would probably be just your challenge around, specific power. So how much energy do you use per ton of CO2 produced? Sometimes you with that economies of scale, you also can't optimize your power usage as much, and that's usually one of your big operational cost disadvantages. But I think you could also flip it around and say, well, what are some of the advantages? And some of the advantages are, if you're talking about a network of small plants like we were doing in biocarbonics in the UK, you can get closer to your customer. So if you know anything about moving cryogenics, distribution costs can quickly overwhelm your production costs. So your cost of distribution is a really important cost post. And if you can get closer to your customer and really optimize that logistics chain, you can reduce logistics costs to kind of compensate you for some of those increased operating costs that you might have due to scale, or also the disadvantage of economies of scale.
Sure, thanks, Chris. And I'll come to you here, Alfonso. I don't know if you've got a perspective to add in terms of the equipment side of things and the challenges there.
Yeah, I would agree with Chris. I think the economy of scale is a good point, and especially, let's say, on the size of the installation that is being done. I would say it gets very complex to justify investment when we're talking about small-scale biogas grading plants, especially, or production plants from biogenic sources. We see this, to give you let's say, relatively tangible example. Many craft breweries or small breweries in the US and Europe are looking into CO2 recovery just as a way to brand themselves as greener and really utilize the CO2 from their own production. But there's, I think, a limit when the economy of scale of large-scale CO2 production, I think, trumps the possibility of recovering your own CO2 from your processes. This would be the same in biogas plants. I think we have to look at the larger biogas plants to really make a business case on when carbon capture is profitable. Of course, everything here is relative, and in countries with very harsh carbon taxes, this may be still a good way to do it. But I think there will always be this balance between the size of the operation and therefore the size of the equipment that is required and the return on investment. From the compressor side only, I would say it's quite tough to get very small compressors for CO2. There is not a big market for this, and there is no, let's say, reliable supply of these machines. It's not a complex design after all, but it's just a market that has never been, I think, there from the economical point of view to justify the development. Now, more and more, as this becomes a bit more popular, in a sense, I think once we get a bit of momentum going, this could become a market. I've seen already in some trade shows very small CO2 recovery systems. Of course, they are quite expensive, but if someone really wants to recover CO2 on a small scale, let's say, it is physically possible. I would say today, if we want to make it profitable, that is the other question.